Hey guys, my name is Neel and welcome to Neel Workshop Zone. So in this episode, we will be learning more stuff about JavaScript. So in the previous episodes, we talked about a lot of important things about JavaScript like keywords, variables, etc. So if you haven't checked it out, I'm going to check out those episodes. But in this episode, we will be talking about a lot more things such as scopes and undefined values for variables. So without further ado, let's talk about them. So first let's talk about the undefined value that you can give for variables. So most of the time when we are writing a variable and we want to define it, we'll write something like variable x is equals to 2. And this is most of the time how we write a variable or how we define a variable. But you don't need to write a value for a variable to be defined in JavaScript. So for example, instead of just writing a variable like this, if you just write a variable without the value and just define a variable, then this also can be written in JavaScript code. And there can be multiple reasons why you don't want to write, the value or what you want the variable x to be. Maybe it's because you want it to be a user input, or maybe it's because you want to figure it out in the future. But if you want to just define variables so that they can be useful in the future, you can do that. So this is, let me take my duster real quick. So this is how we can write undefined variables in JavaScript. So these undefined variables are, well, their value is undefined. Their value is known as undefined. So that is how you can write undefined variables in JavaScript. Now, there's a really important point about JavaScript variables, and that is redeclaring. So for example, if I write something like, let's say, variable x is equals to 2 and variable x, let us take the same example. So if I write something like this, you might be confused on what this means. And in terms of JavaScript, it basically means the same thing. And just like you get an example of variable is undefined, you might be getting confused that if you give a value to the variable and then you write it as like this, then doesn't it coincide? And because one of the variable x is defined as 2 and the other one is undefined. So what will happen? Well, if you define a variable with a value and then you write it like this, the JavaScript code counts it as if you're just calling the variable once more. It doesn't take it as undefined because you've already defined the function. So when you write like this, it's not going to lead to anything. Instead, it's just going to bring this variable once more again over here. So that is about redeclaring variables. So now let's talk about scopes or scope. But before we talk about scope, there's still one more important thing that we need to learn, and that is the importance of dollar signs and underscores in JavaScript. So, since these aren't described as special characters or anything like that, and they can be still described as just letters, you can use them to define anything. So, for example, you write something dollar is equals to 72, and double dollars is equals to 63, or something like that, or dollar s is equals to 1, or you can write something like that. And same goes with underscore. So for example, if you're writing something with underscore small h, underscore capital H, or h underscore, or something like that, it still works as different variables or different constants, because these do not mean the same thing, as dollar and underscore in JavaScript are also known as variables. So that is also one more important point. So now let's talk about scopes. So there are 4 main scopes. As you can see, there are a lot of scopes depending on how deep you want to talk about it. But since we're talking about the basic level of JavaScript, there are mainly 4 scopes. You have the global scope, you have the function scope, you have the local scope, and you have the block scope. So these 4 are the scopes that we use in JavaScript. Now these are related to the variables or global variables, function variables, and all of that. but we'll talk about them in the next episode. But for now, let's talk about these scopes. So global scope is the block of code that can be used anywhere in the program. So for example, if I define a variable in the program, something which is something like variable x is equal to 2, and I don't use curly brackets around it, and I just like type HTML, body, head, everything. I define it and I use it somewhere below, and I just close the function, then this is called as global scope, because this variable can be used anywhere else in the code and isn't restricted to a certain part of the code. So that is what global scope means. Now we also have function scope, and function scope arises when a function is written. So for example, whenever you write function, a scope itself is also created, or when I'm talking about scope, we are basically talking about the accessibility or visibility of that code or the variable. So when we're talking about function scope, the function scope can be visible inside of the part in which it was written, inside of the curly brackets, as you can see, but it's not going to be visible to anything else. So for example, if I write something like function card, and then open some curly brackets and write some code regarding the function card and close the brackets, you can call it as a function scope because it works only for the function and nothing else. And speaking about local scope is a scope that is local to the code. So for example, if I just write some code in between these curly brackets, then you can call it as local code basically, which is a part of this code. So for example, if I write something like variable x is equal to 2, and if I write something similar to this regarding this outside of the code, it still counts as local scope because it's still related to it and it's still local to the code. And then you have block scopes. So till 2015 to 16, till the release of ES6, block scopes weren't really introduced in JavaScript, but after they were introduced with let and const. So after let and const were introduced, block scopes were also introduced in JavaScript. So block scopes are really cool. So for example, when you write some curly brackets and rewrite some code between them, such as x is equal to 2 or anything like that, or like let x is equal to 2, and you write some code and close in the curly brackets, they will be closed out forever. So this x is equal to 2, when you use it in another part of the same program, it won't be counted again as the same variable. It will be deleted, and it only works for a specific part of the code in which, for example, in this case, the curly brackets in which the code is written. So that is how block scope works. And the 4 of these are really similar, and I understand that, and it might be confusing, but to better understand them, we also need to learn about the variables and the keywords let, const, and more about them, so that we can understand more about how scopes work. So this is the introduction to scopes, and we also talked about a lot more things. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out any new videos. And that's all folks, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.